Hey all, it's Robin. Welcome back to my channel. Today we are talking about some more of my recent reads. I have another 10 books to talk about today. I did a lot of reading vlogs and things like that. Not all of them ended up getting posted because a couple of them fell through, but I have 10 more books to talk about. Let's just get right into the reviews. So starting it off right away, I read 2 books for the historical romance readathon. I never ended up posting that vlog because the vlog content kind of sucked and I ended up failing that readathon so hard. First up is A Lady for a Duke by Alexis Hall. This was the first book that I had read for that readathon and it was a 5-star. This might be my favorite historical romance of all time at this point, but this is a trans historical romance. It is Pride Month when this is going up, so if you are looking for a good book for Pride Month, I highly, highly recommend this one. Alexis Hall writes a lot of queer romances, but I think this might be his best writing to date. I loved everything about this book. I loved the writing. The prose in here was so beautiful. There were like sentences and things. I need to go into this physical copy and highlight some of the like passages because I was like posting about some of them because they were just absolutely amazing. I loved these two were friends growing up, and our heroine ended up faking her own death so that she could live her life, and they find their way back to each other. So it is a second chance friends to lovers romance, and it has some humor elements built in. There is amazing like mental health rep. Our heroine is dealing with PTSD and addiction and everything that goes along with that for his like relationships, and it was just this book is so beautiful and I cannot recommend it enough. After that, I picked up To Marry and to Meddle by Martha Waters. This is the 3rd book in the Regency Vows series. The first book was To Have and to Hoax, and the second book was To Love and to Loathe. And in this one, we are following the 3rd of the best friends. Her name is Emily. Totally forgot. So this is Emily's romance, and it is her marriage of convenience to Julian. And Julian is a member of the Ton, a member of society, but he also owns a theater, which was not accepted at this point, so he is cut off from his family, and the two of them have a marriage of convenience so that she can get out from under her family's thumb, and he wants his theater to have a more reputable reputation, and so they have a marriage of convenience, and of course feelings ensue. And I ended up giving this one 3 stars. I thought this was fine. Like, this was my favorite, I think, of the romances in this series. The series is a lot of fun. It's super quick and there's a lot of humor and things in here. This series just doesn't elicit a lot of emotions for me, so I was just left feeling like minimally in any way about this. I didn't feel much for the characters, I didn't feel much for the romance, the plot was fine, and so in the end I just gave this one 3 stars. It was a fun read, it was a quick read, but I wasn't left with any lasting feelings about this book. From there, I ended up going into a reread of A Dark and Hollow Star by Ashley Shuttleworth. This is another book that is perfect for Pride Month. I decided to reread this one before going into the sequel because it is a chunky beast and a lot happens in here, and it had been a year since I had read this, so I wanted to refresh my memory before going into the sequel, and I gave this one 5 stars again. I know that's not the most popular opinion. I know people were really disappointed by this. There are a million characters in here. It is super like political fantasy and it's very slow. But I think this is such a unique fantasy. There are so many like classic fantasy characters and tropes and things, but the way that they're all woven together makes this feel so unique. It's very reminiscent for me in the feeling of reading like Nalini Singh's Archangel Guild Hunter series, where it's like there's all these classic fantastical paranormal things, but the way that they're all interwoven is so different, and that's the feeling that I get with this, only this is hella queer. And I loved that. I really like Ashley Shuttleworth's writing. I think their writing is great. I love the audiobook for this. There is a full cast for it, and I have a really good time with the series. And the ending of this first book gets me every time. Highly recommend if you like queer political fantasy. After that, I ended up going into Deliver by Pam Godwin. This is a bind up of the first 3 books, but the first book in here is Deliver. I ended up giving this first book 4 stars. It's probably closer to like a 4.5 star. My my thing with Pam Godwin is I haven't given her books 5 stars yet, but these books stick with me. And so I really should just start giving these 5 stars because these books, I will read them and I'll be like, the story is kind of flawed. There's these things wrong with it, but I can't stop thinking about her books. This book is extremely, extremely dark. You are following a heroine who is in this like captive situation, and she is forced to essentially traffic people and make them sex slaves and sell them. You learn a lot about her situation throughout this first book, but at the beginning, she kidnaps this local small town hero who is a athlete. He's a football player for Baylor, and she kidnaps him, and the two of them have a captor-captive romance, and it is very dark, so intense, and very difficult to read. So much on-page sexual assault is in this, as well as a lot of PTSD and things like that. So huge trigger warnings. The story is not going to be for everyone, but I was obsessed. I'm obsessed with this, and I'm very interested to see where it goes from here. This is a spin-off of the Tangled Lies series because we do get characters from that series in here later on, and I'm very interested to see where it goes and like how it all ties together. So I gave this one like a 4.5 star. Highly recommend. I cannot wait to continue on with this. After that, I picked up From Bad to Cursed by Lana Harper, which is the sequel to, it's right behind me actually, Payback's a Witch. So this first book was a female-female witch romance. Again, perfect for Pride Month. And this one is following one of the heroines from that first book. This is following her sister, who is a fashion designer, and she has an enemies to lovers romance with Rowan, who is one of the rival family's sons. The two of them have to work together to try and solve a mystery, and I loved the mystery plot. For the first like 2/3 of this book was actually a 4 star, and it just kind of lost it for me at the end. I loved their chemistry. I loved the like push and pull of their enemies to lovers romance because like you could feel the tension between them, but then like their animosity and like their history was just kind of getting in the way. So I loved that push and pull, but the ending of this just didn't quite work for me. It felt like it started to lose steam at the end, and then I didn't like how our hero kind of villainized our heroine at the end because it was both of them, but at the end he ended up making it a lot about her and she took all the blame, and it just kind of irritated me. That like third act breakup thing, it just did not work for me. It bugged me quite a bit. There was something about it that just didn't sit right with me, and that ended up pushing it down. But I did enjoy this quite I love this world. I love Lana Harper's writing. It is so vivid and like lush, and I love this small town. I love the witchy vibes. This has a very like creepy atmosphere with a dark twist, and I really like that, and I like her characters. I love how she built, like this has legit world building and magic building in it, which I love, and I really like how she weaves that into a romance, but the actual romance part at the end, it lost me a little. I am very excited for the third book though still. Like I said, I'm obsessed with this world. I'll continue to read in this world. Just wasn't my perfect book. After that, I went into my Bookopoly readathon vlog books, and so the next 5 books are all from that video, from that readathon. I will link the vlog for that weekend up above, again, as well as in the description box. And the first book that I read for that readathon was Thief by Cassie Mint. This is a super steamy, short novella, insta-love novella. I really have liked Cassie Mint, what I've read by her. I've really liked her insta-love novellas. They're really quick and fun. This one I ended up giving 3 stars. It wasn't my favorite. I preferred the other one that I read, which was Thin Ice, a lot more than this one. This one just didn't have enough of anything. It didn't have enough character development. It didn't have enough plot. It didn't have enough steam to it. It was just very flat. So in this, we are following our heroine, who is a thief. Right at the beginning, she ends up sneaking into this Silicon Valley like tech guru's penthouse by getting into a suitcase, and they roll her right into his penthouse, and she is in there to steal a gem. And it turns out that he is not on vacation. He is asleep in his apartment, and the two of them end up meeting because he calls the cops on her. Obviously, someone broke into his apartment. They end up having like a one-night thing together. There's a little scavenger hunt thing that happens, and obviously they find their way back to each other, but it wasn't enough. There wasn't enough to it. I read this in like 45 minutes or something. It was super quick and fun, but I needed more of something, either more steam or more character development or something. It was mediocre. After that, I read A Game of Retribution by Scarlett St. Clair. This is the second book in the Hades saga, so this aligns with the Hades and Persephone series, but this one is told from Hades' point of view, and the other one is told from Persephone's point of view. So this aligns with A Touch of Ruin. Something about this middle book feels 100% like setup. This is one Persephone being a child, a petulant child through the whole thing. She just complains for this entire book about how life isn't fair. Everyone around her is trying to explain, like, you have to follow the rules, and like these are the rules, like a foundational, fundamental rules of life. And she's just like, no. And so she ends up like screwing herself over in this book in the end. In this one, it was interesting to get Hades' point of view because you're seeing a lot of that political maneuvering that is kind of sending them into this culmination of the war. But this book is just set up. There's not much to it. It is all about the fates playing a game and everyone stealing things and setting up for the next book. Doesn't feel like its own book with its own plot. It feels very much like we got the characters in the world in book 1, and here's all the things that had to happen to them so that books 3 and 4 can happen. And so it just wasn't my favorite in the series. It's definitely necessary to the series, just not my favorite. After that, I read Red Dirt Heart by N.R. Walker, and this is an MM story set in the Australian outback. We are following a character who owns one of the biggest ranches in the world in Australia, and a Texas rancher ends up coming to stay with him for a month to learn all about how they farm in the desert. And this other character, he just finished a degree in like agricultural science or something like that. And so he is there to learn all about farming in the desert. And it is a very cool romance. The setting is so unique and so interesting. I am a city girl through and through, but for half a second I was like, I kind of want to go to the outback. Like, no, I don't. There's snakes and spiders and things that can kill me. But for a second, I thought I did because this book made me want to go. And I thought this was really cute. It was really fun. The found family of all of the people on the farm was really good. This does have a lot of gay phobia in it, so trigger warnings for that as well, because there are some not so great homophobic comments made in here on page, and it can be a little tough. Content warnings for that, but I loved this book, and I do plan to continue on because I think there's 3 more books following these characters, and I'm excited to get more of them. After that, I picked up Gallant by V.E. Schwab, and I gave this 5 stars. This is a creepy YA fantasy story, and I'm not going to talk a lot about the plot. If you haven't read the plot here, I recommend not reading the plot there. It doesn't necessarily, I think it just gives away a little bit too much. You're not going to not enjoy this if you read this, but I think that the reveals will be a little bit more impactful if you don't. So we are following a girl, a teenage girl, I think she's 14 in here, and she lives at this all-girls boarding school, and you know that she was left there around 2 years old, and she has always grown up thinking that she has no family until one day she receives a letter from an uncle she didn't know about asking her to return to Gallant. And when she gets there, she realizes that she has family and this massive mansion, but things are very, very creepy at Gallant. And she has a journal from her mother that she never met that tells her that she will be safe as long as she never returns to Gallant. And so now she is trying to figure out why her mother didn't want her here and what is going on with this creepy house. I will say that this book is essentially no plot and all vibes. So I give this 5 stars, but just know that like Addie, there's no plot. It's just vibes. So if you want some like world building and actual plot and stuff, you're not getting it in this book. This book is 300 pages. Like it's very short. So this is just atmosphere and vibes. It is spooky. I listened to the audiobook and there are these journal entries throughout, and sometimes lines are crossed out and you hear like pen on paper as they are reading it, and it is so unsettling. There are also a lot of illustrations throughout here, so I did kind of like have the book open so that I could see all of the creepy illustrations as I was reading, and I loved this. I loved this a lot. And then the final book that I read for this round of recent reads was Ever After Always by Chloe Leese, and I gave this one 5 stars as well. This is the third book in the Bergman Brothers series, but the fourth book that I read in this series. I ended up reading these a little out of order, but I had to go back and read this one, and I'm so glad I did because this was amazing. This is a marriage in trouble, second chance romance, and oh my god, this book was so hard to read at times. I felt this book. I love a marriage in trouble story, and when it's done well, it is so hard hitting because you know they fell in love once already, and watching them struggle hurts. And like that, them coming back together is somehow extra sweet, and that was definitely the case with this one. This one deals heavily with generalized anxiety disorder, and the rep in here was 10 out of 10 amazing. I have not connected to a anxiety plot like this as much since The Charm Offensive by Alison Cochrane. This generalized anxiety disorder rep was so good. There was a scene in here where our hero is talking about how he like hyper aware of all of the mistakes that he makes, and he fixates, and it causes him to spiral because he thinks about all of the mistakes that he has made. And I felt that so viscerally, and the rep on how it affects all the other little aspects of your life, so perfect. They do go on a trip in here to Hawaii, and watching them go through therapy and make their way back together, it was just, oh, it was so, so good. The like third act conflict in here was done perfectly, where it wasn't like too much. It just kind of reassured them that they they were right for each other and that they could support each other and get through anything. And I loved their relationship. 10 out of 10, 5 stars, one of my favorites. So that is it for my recent reads. Let me know if you've read any of these books. Let me know what you rated it, or if you want to read any of these books, and I will catch you all in my next video. Bye!